Hey, welcome everybody to a Zoom call between myself. My name's Marty Crotty. I'm the head coach of the men's lightweight rowing team at Princeton University. And I have here our two captains for next year, Jonas, David Slear, and also the coxswain for the first varsity crew for the last two seasons, Sydney Edwards. Do you guys want to introduce yourself and just talk about where you're zooming in from? David first.
Yeah. Hi, I'm David. I'm from Dallas, Texas. I'm just at home right now. Yeah.
My name's Marcus. Jonas. Home for me is London, England, where I'm currently staying.
And I'm Sydney Edwards. I'm currently home in Sarasota, Florida.
All right, we thought it would be fun in lieu of the Harvard Yale Princeton lightweight rowing race, which is a historic race. It's about more than 95 years old, goes back to the early 1920s, and it takes up such a big emotional space on our calendar. We thought it would be interesting, in lieu of that race not being run this year, we thought it would be interesting to go back and look at a couple of the last couple years' races, which have been very exciting races, and it's conveniently Princeton victories. But my athletes are just going to talk a little bit about what this race means to them and maybe some of the specifics of last year's race, because it was such a cool race to watch for any kind of rowing fans out there. Sydney, tell me a little bit about how the team had focused on the race and what your thoughts about this race going into the season were. We had won the race the year before, but here we are on our home waters, and just tell me about what you and the guys thought about this race going into the season.
Yeah, of course. So, of course, this is HYP, so it's probably one of the biggest races that we have, and it's the end of our regular season. So it definitely carries a lot of the weight of the season. And we had such a phenomenal season leading up to this point. So we were super, super excited about it. But it was definitely super important because we knew we had won the year before. We knew that we wanted to continue that kind of winning streak. And one thing that we were always thinking about is kind of trying to sink the dock again, purely knowing that we hadn't won this race at home in quite a few years. So I definitely remember just really driving home with the guys that this could be the year that we really can bring the trophy back home and bring it home on our home course.
And Marcus, this is something I usually never ask about because it's time that you guys share together, not in my presence, and I appreciate that as a rower. I gave my little pre-race speech and kind of race plan based on the weather in the locker room, and then I have to go out and watch some of the lower boat races. But after I left and after I had dispensed all the great information that was going to enable you guys to win this race, what was the last thing you guys talked about as a crew before you launched?
So I remember because ever since September, I remember you saying how big this race was. It was we hadn't won it at home in so many years, and it was the HYP on home water. We had a bunch of alumni there. It was so we'd obviously built it up for such a long time. So I remember there wasn't much being said. We were all confident. We all know how quick we were. We'd had enough races to know that. Everyone was super focused. Everyone was super dedicated. So the whole pre-race, there wasn't much being said. We could just sort of see in each other's eyes that we were ready to go. So we didn't really feel like much needed to be said.
Right. So all the best laid plans. We had a great week of preparation. Despite getting thumped up in Ithaca, we were making progress. We were getting faster every week, and that's all well and good. And then David, tell me a little bit about one more element to that day, especially when you kind of rode around the corner in warm up. One more element to that day that was just going to basically take everything we had done and all the best laid plans and turn them upside down on their head.
Yeah. So it was a pretty windy day that day, and we kind of knew that going into it, just looking at the forecast the night before. can't remember exactly how much, but it was probably like 20 miles per hour out of the west, which is coming off the shore. And so that makes the lanes as uneven as they're going to get on Lake Carnegie. But we kind of knew that going into it. We knew it was going to be a tough conditions to row in. So I think that we were just we turned the corner and just like kind of let it sink in that this is what we were going to be racing in, and just got used to it and continued the warm up as was.
Well, I just want to add. I think you said 20 miles an hour. I believe it was 35 mile. It was severe, and in all my years of racing on Lake Carnegie and coaching races on Lake Carnegie, it was the windiest wind out of the west. If the wind was coming out of the north or the south, it would have made conditions unrowable. I think Lake Carnegie was the only show in town that day. Because any other waterway in the entire Northeast Mid-Atlantic was unrowable. But it was 30 to 35 miles an hour sustained, and then there were like these really severe snappy gusts. And one more thing that happened before this race was that one of the starting blocks, one of the stake boats in lane 4 had broken loose. You can see it drifting off in the side of the screen there. It had broken loose, and we were not going to be able to fix it. So we had to shift the lanes into lanes 1, 2, and 3, which made conditions even more unfair. And I think as you see this race play out, you'll understand a little bit more why that is. So lane 1, where Yale was, and the lane draw was the night before, and it's totally random. Yale has the best water. Princeton has the second best water. And Harvard fortunately drew the short straw, and they have the worst water out in lane 3. And you can even see that as they're sitting in the blocks with a wind gust kind of coming across the lake there. But we'll get this moving, and we can just kind of talk about the specifics of the race with Sydney, Marcus, and David here. So yeah, so Yale's at the top of the screen there in lane 1, Princeton's in the middle, lane 2 in white, and Harvard's in their traditional crimson in lane 3. And just as this broadcast goes on here, you can see the gusts kind of blowing past the screen here, and just making the water dark or shiny depending on the conditions at the time. So pretty even start here, but Sydney, you want to talk about this like 200 to 400 stretch as we watch Yale already start to row away from us there. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so it wasn't really a secret that we weren't the quickest off the line the past 2 years. So obviously you can kind of see us begin to separate around the 200, 250 meter mark. But I just remember in this first 500 meters being like, all right, we anticipated this. This was definitely part of the plan. First 500 meters, not necessarily our strongest, but let's try to get to our base rhythm. Let's try to get to that kind of really sweet spot and maybe start to carve into Yale a little bit. But as you can kind of see as the camera pans over, Yale had quite a significant lead. And so I just remember at this point being a little bit like, okay, maybe not as much as our plan as I wanted it to be.
Right.
So I just started working off of Harvard.
So, okay, you're working off of Harvard. Good plan, because Yale's gone. Yale's gone now. So, Marcus, despite knowing you're slow off the line, like here you are 600 in, Yale's already got open water. What's going on in your mind?
Well, to be completely honest, from where I was sitting, I had no idea how far ahead they were. I just knew that they were ahead. So watching this footage was always quite surprising to me. I knew they were going to be ahead off the start. From what Sydney said, we were slow off the start and the conditions were unfair. So it wasn't anything surprising. So I was just like, let's buckle down and race this race.
There we crossed the 750, and this is where, well, Sydney, what was the decisive moment here? Was there a call? Was there something that happened with the wind? here you are, 800 meters. And this is where Yale kind of gets their maximum advantage. Now, tell me about this 10 strokes right here.
Yeah, so right here, you'll start to see it in the video, but there's this huge gust of wind that comes over. It's about the K. There's a huge gust of wind that comes over, and I could see it. And that Yale coxswain gets pushed over, and they get pushed over into the buoys, which their blades are getting stuck. Their blades are going up in the air. And at that point, I was like, all right, we have to go, and we need to go right now. So we're crossing over the K, and I just remember being like, 10 strokes, you have to take this right now, or else we're not going to be up there again.
So, David, easier said than done. You know, Sydney's yelling at you. She's telling you to capitalize on this moment where the Yale coxswain's having quite a bit of trouble there. And you can see the wind blowing across the lake there. Easier said than done. What are you thinking as a rower? Like, what are you trying to do technically? What are you thinking about in order to keep your traction here?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we in the boat couldn't really see where Yale was, but we just had to kind of trust Sydney when she told us that they'd stop moving. And then, like she said, that big gust hit us. And I was just thinking about, like, I got to keep getting the blade in and getting the legs down hard. Yeah, and just trying to eat back into them.
All right, so in that last 30 to 40 strokes, or call it 400 meters, a lot has changed here. We've got Princeton, seems to have yet stopped Yale's progress. Harvard, exit stage left, out there in lane 3, in all fairness. They're getting the worst of the wind out there in lane 3. But here's where I am as a coach saying, oh, God, don't come back and get connection with Yale and not win this race. So already I'm thinking, don't make progress like that and have the progress stop. So Marcus, what are we doing here? We still got 9 seats to make up. We got 500 meters to go. The worst of the wind is still coming across the lake. What are you doing as a rower, as a stroke of an 8, to make sure you get those 9 seats back in this next 400 meters?
Well, I still didn't know where they were, but I remember one stroke we took probably by the 500 meter mark, where I remember everyone getting their blades in so, like, perfectly in sync. And when that happens, and we'd had it in training, we knew that we were going to move, and we knew that we were going to have a very quick last 500. So from the stroke seat, I could feel that, and I could feel the energy behind me. So that was just confidence at that point that we're ready to go, and we're going to go now.
So Sydney, a lot of coxswains out there at this point would probably be coming out of their skin and just yelling and get the pom-poms out. How are you executing this last 30 strokes here, which is just amazing?
Yeah. Well, you could feel it in the boat. Like, you could feel we were mounting a charge, and we were honestly taking it. So it was just every 5 strokes, I was like, all right, that's 2 more seats. Give me 2 more, 2 more, 2 more. And so it was just a constant me asking for more, them delivering. And then also just me saying, you have this many strokes, and we will not lose by 1 seat or 2 seats. You have this many strokes to get across the finish line first.
So Marcus, do you know where you are here? With 10 strokes to go.
Yeah, you can hear the crowds going. As you can see, the crowds were unbelievable that day, which made it even more special. Especially and you see me there just wash out my last stroke, which was quite embarrassing.
Luckily you didn't do it 4 strokes before that. So a little bit of commentary on the fact that the camera went down into the bottom of the boat there. Thank God we have the volume down. In the launch that day, I had 2 really special alums, one named Rob Milam, who was my roommate, and he was the captain of the lightweight rowing program in 1998. And I also had a guy named Jay Liddell, class of 99. And Rob and Jay were in that 8 that had last won on Lake Carnegie in this race. So could not have been more of a special 2 guys to have in the launch with me for that race. And so that was the 2019 HYP. Thanks for your commentary, guys.
I had no idea that those 2 guys were in the boat last time we'd won.
I didn't know that either. I knew that you had people in the boat, but I didn't know who they were.
I knew they were like Marty's friends from back in the day, but I had no idea that they were like, had won it. That's pretty cool. That makes it cool.
Also, I don't know about you 2, but I never remember being down by open water. I was like, no, it's fine. It's totally fine. Like, every time that I watch that video, I'm like, woo! Like, we were really losing there.
Yeah, I remember thinking about what they were. Like,
Oh, I was lying to you guys, like through the skin of my teeth. Like I was like, they're not that far away, I promise.
All right, so here's the 2018 HYP race. This is up in Derby, Connecticut, up on Yale's course, which presents a whole different set of things you got to consider. The reason the boats started with a stagger is because at about the 800-meter mark, a dog leg left starts, and so the course is not straight. So it's kind of like running the inside of the turn in a 200-meter track race. Everybody starts with a stagger. You don't know who's ahead until 800 meters to go. So here we have Harvard closest to the camera, Princeton's in the middle again, and Yale is all the way up top. And so Yale started with a stagger, but once again, we see them moving away from Princeton. And Sydney, give me the lay of the land here, 300 meters into this race.
Yeah, so like you were saying with that stagger, it's incredibly difficult to tell anything about where you are in comparison to the other boats. So here you kind of have to forget about the stagger and do the best that you can, just working off of other boats, keeping the crew motivated. So here, very similar to 2019, just kind of really focusing on getting into a rhythm and fast. And obviously you can see Yale has pulled away a little bit. So I had recognized that and was trying to get the boys back up on top of Yale.
And David, you were in 7th seed in this one, so you were a little closer to Marcus. What are you, do you remember anything from this race that we were doing strategically? I think we're about 600 meters in here. Yale, we kind of stopped Yale's progress. We're inching up on Harvard. What are we doing strategically in terms of race plan right here?
I mean, I think given the nature of the course and knowing, like you, I think every year before the HYP, you've always told us that Yale always races hard to the K. I think the goal for the first half of this race was just like stay in contact. And then also worth noting is Harvard was undefeated going into this race. So we were really trying to stay up on them, making sure that they didn't make up the stagger before the turn. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking about right now as a coach watching this race from my motorboat, pretty much from the same vantage point of the camera, was as this stagger runs out. That's the middle of the turn. We still got about 100 meters to go in the full turn. As this stagger runs out, we're going to have 3 boats across, dead even, 750 meters to go for the Goldthwait Cup, which is more than 95 years old. It's named after a Harvard alum who drowned, actually. And his classmates donated a cup to be awarded to the victor of this race. So here we go. We've got 750 meters to go. It's a drag race for, I believe this was maybe the 93rd annual Goldthwait Cup. Marcus, any commentary on coming out of the turn? What are you trying to do as a stroke coming out of the turn? Margins are real. Did you take a look? Are you doing anything with the cadence? What are we doing here?
Yeah, of course I took a look. I remember what David said, Harvard were undefeated going into this. So I remember coming out of the turn, knowing that it was even and seeing that we were ahead of Harvard. And that just gave me a huge boost of confidence. And I knew it was going to do the same for everyone behind me. Being a freshman, I knew there was a lot more experience behind me. So I just thought, let's try and raise the cadence a bit. Let's try and bring up the pace a bit because we know we haven't fast last 500.
Sydney, do you remember anything that we had put in a race plan, or how close was I in terms of what I said was going to happen and what actually happened? I actually forget, but.
The biggest thing that I can remember is just once you said that margins were real, once we hit that 800 meter mark, that Yale was just going to just absolutely go for it. So I remember like screaming that margins were real. and that we just had to keep pushing and we had to keep going. Like we were in just an absolute lock for 500 meters, and it was just an absolute battle to the end. So,
you know, to Yale's credit, what they did to hold that 1.5 seat lead for 40 strokes. I mean, it put all the coaches that were watching this race from the side just in stitches. And at this point, I have to be honest, I think Yale gets about 1/2 seat, and I thought that our run was done. But Marcus, what happened here in the last 15 strokes that just, like, what happens in a crew when this happens?
So in the last 15 strokes of any big race like this, sort of the whole world just turns black, and you just sort of, you don't look out the boat, you don't think about anything apart from the next stroke. You just get up as quick as you can, put your blade in, and absolutely slam the legs down, and just pray that you're moving quicker than the other crew, which luckily we were in this case.
Yeah, and that, 2019 was the second time I had to apologize to the other coaches who were within earshot of the yelp that I let out. But to me at the time, it had been a while since I had seen something as dramatic as that happen in the last 20 strokes of a race. And that was really impressive, just the way you got traction and the way, the first 30 strokes of that last 40 strokes, Yale held their ground. I didn't think you guys were going to get through, but the way you guys just kept pushing and kept pushing, you saw when you finally were able to break Yale just how dramatic it was. A little bit of it was the angle of the camera, but it took you 35 strokes to get 1 seat, and then you got 3 seats in the last 10 strokes. So I just thought that was really cool. And I'm going to take this opportunity to apologize to Ned and Andy one more time for the yelp I let out at the end of that race. But guys, just in general, tell me your understanding just about this race in general and why it takes a little extra special place on our calendar every year. Don't all talk at once. Go ahead, Marcus.
Okay, I'll start. Well, even sort of being from over here in England, I knew about the Princeton, Yale, Harvard being a big deal, sort of the history behind the 3 teams. So getting the chance to race in the first varsity in these races going in was an unbelievable honor. And I knew I could feel how much it meant for the rest of the team when we were training for it. That lining up on the start line, I knew exactly what it meant to everyone. So I've been very proud to race those 2 races. I'm very sad it's not happening this year, but it does mean a lot to me. And I know it means a lot to all the lads.
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Just kind of echoing what Marcus said, like the history behind the race makes it something so special. And like, I remember just lining up on the start line every year being like, wow, this feels like something so much bigger than like myself and any of the other races I've been in. And also last year was our last race on Carnegie for our seniors. And as it turns out, our seniors this year as well, which kind of just made it that much more special.
Yeah, and just kind of echoing what my 2 teammates said, like, it's absolutely historic. Like, it is the 3 teams, the 3 powerhouse lightweight teams that have been around for years and years and years. And the fact that we get to race each other every single year, right around now, unfortunately not currently. But we are connected to so many alumni and so many future rowers by just being able to compete in this race. And I think when you line up on the starting line, you kind of feel that connection to the thousands, if not like multiple thousands of previous rowers that have been able to have that same honor, is to just kind of lay down on the line with 3 of the most historic rowing programs that exist in the United States.
Well, guys, thanks for sharing your thoughts. Thanks for joining the first annual HYP recap. But hey, it's the best we can do on short notice, and especially as it relates to this weekend, the last Saturday usually the last Saturday in April every year. Sometimes it's the first Saturday in May. But thanks a lot, Cody, for running this. And yeah, hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Thank you.
Thank you.